These technical seminars are an Intertech production. For instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.
Now right down here at the bottom, I've got 5 different query strings, and the ones in red don't work. For example, that first one, if you just specify the name of your site, and of course the 6831, I want you to ignore that because that's what port my machine was running at when I tested this. If you just say 6831, that's going to automatically use the default route because you didn't specify a controller, you didn't specify an action or an ID. Whereas the second one, hey, we did specify that we want to use the product controller. Okay, so that's going to use the product route. And for the action, well, it's going to use index because that's the default one that's specified here, and it's not passing anything along for an ID. This next one here, where we just say 6, it's not going to know which route you wanted to take. You didn't specify a controller, and you need to specify the controller first. If not specifying the controller, well, you'd have to specify the controller and you'd have to specify the action before you just pass along a 6. So that's not going to work. Excuse me. This next one here, product junk, well, again, junk is not a viable action. That does not happen to exist as a public method within our controller. So that was not going to work either. But the final one there where we say product and index, yeah, that's going to work. Something else you can do with these routes is you can even set up constraints. For example, notice in that get number route, we've got product, and then we've got action and ID. Well, in that top one there, we're saying there's a constraint that ID must exist as a decimal. This is using something called regular expressions, right? And it's ensuring that it is actually a decimal type. If they pass in any other piece of data as an ID and it's not a decimal, then it's going to come down to the one below it and use that route instead. So here's how you can go ahead and use these constraints. There's other types of constraints you can use, of course, depending on your skill set with regular expressions. And of course, you notice how we have it from most specific to the most generic one at the bottom here. Now, when you get several routes in here, this gets confusing. Okay, it really does, because you're wondering, oh, when's it going to fall into this route? When's it going to fall into this? What other types of data can people pass along in a query string? That's something else to be concerned about as well. You're going to have to test all different types of actual requests that are coming along in a query string. Like here, for example, we have a bunch of them that work and which ones and some of them that don't work. And I highlighted the ones in red that, again, don't work. Right? Notice that last red one I've got listed there. Because we didn't specify which public method and we just pass along an ID, it doesn't know which it's not going to know the right public method within the actual home controller. So again, you'll have to test every one of your actual routes and make sure that they work correctly. Something you may want to take advantage of is perhaps downloading a route debugger. And there are free ones available on the internet, and they can actually help you define how your routes should be written in your global.asax file. Note that the register route method can be unit tested as well. You can go ahead and unit test this with all different types of pieces of data to make sure that people are navigated to the proper controller and view ultimately. Here's a route debugger you can go ahead and navigate to and download off the internet. Now, mind you, there might be some better ones out there available already. This came out in 2008 on March 13th, and you'll notice that it's just showing us some basic information of controller versus action versus ID and whether or not they work correctly. So check out some route debuggers that are available on the internet. Remember, the controllers are responsible for handling the incoming request, and they are the first of the 3 MVC members to interact with the user. That's, of course, ignoring the fact that the routes are handled by global.asax. Most typically, they're going to be the ones that interact with the model to generate or retrieve data. And, of course, they'll take all that data, stick it into their property bag, if you will, and pass it off to a particular view. Remember, every public method inside of your controller class can be called from the actual query string. So if you just add another public method to your controller class, like called doStuff, and somebody actually poses doStuff right on the query string, they're calling your public method. So be aware of how you're declaring your methods in your controller class. Again, notice the requirements for defining a controller. It must inherit from the controller class, and N in the name controller. Alternatively, you could have it implement the iController interface, which just requires you to have the execute method. The most simple controller of all just returns a string. Notice this controller here called the Hello World controller. We've just got a simple greet method which returns Hello World. That's not very hard. I mean, it's extremely simple. But mind you, that's not the most well-formed XHTML you've ever seen in your life, because it is just literally going to be the string Hello World. Again, notice how we're passing this stuff along on the query string. For example, we're calling the Hello World controller, and then we're calling the greet public method right up there in the URL. As far as the controller's methods, they will typically return an action result, and that first one that's listed there is the most popular one, where you're just going to return another view. Although you could also return a partial view as well. Maybe you're using a user control, for example. Maybe you want to redirect to a different route result. You can go ahead and do that with the redirect to route result. Redirect result, content result. You can see some of the other ones that are available here. Note that you can even send them to an unauthorized result if you'd like. These, of course, are all returned directly from our controller, specifically our public methods in our controller class. To pass data, two different ways we can pass data to a view. One, the most popular way, is by using that view data dictionary object, and it's oftentimes referred to as view data. And this, of course, is great for a single request and a response. If you need to redirect them to a different route or to a different controller altogether, then you should use the temp data dictionary object instead. This will store it between multiple requests and responses. Here you can see we've got two public methods, right? We've got the greet method and we have the say hi method. Again, the greet one's just returning a string. Whereas the say hi method, this one's different. It's sticking some information in that view data dictionary object called here is some view data info for the controller, from the controller, and then it returns a view. Now when you're doing that return view command, that last line of code there, then it actually looks for that hello world view. Actually not the hello world view, but the say hi view. And here we actually have the view, and you can see how it pulls that information out of the view data. Also notice that from the time we're using temp data. Back over here in our controller we're using view data to store the string, and we're using temp data to store the actual time. And we're displaying it directly here in our web page using the header 2 and header 3 size elements of our HTML. I know, we're directly in control over what HTML is sent to the client now. We're not just setting text properties or label controls anymore. Want to add another controller? Well, easy way to do it. Right-click the folder and choose Add Controller. And you go ahead and add another class which inherits from the controller class. And of course remember to name it with that controller suffix. You can even go ahead and do Ajax calls from the controller. And of course they can be public methods exposed from that controller class. Like here you notice we've got a JavaScript result for a method called Ajax greet. Now with that Ajax greet method, which is just returning some JavaScript, doing an alert, hello there, notice how over on our view we actually have that Ajax.action link. Click me for a greeting, and then there's the name of the method that we can call back over on the controller, Ajax greet. And that of course will do this simple little JavaScript alert.
For more free learning resources and to see the latest lineup of our instructor-led .NET, Java, and XML courses, visit us at www.intertech.com.